My grandfather famously said to me years ago, I asked him if he wanted to go on a walk. His famous words were, I only have so many heartbeats. Why waste them? And I was like, man, that is just the worst way to look at that. Like, that's not how that works, dude. Like, that's all I could say. I was like,
Yeah.
Grandma, that's not how that works. Like, literally, by moving, you get more of that, right? Like, you access more of life when you engage with that process, right? You're actually, by not engaging with it, you're shutting off access to any more life that you could be gaining. 60 minutes of strength training across a week lowers your risk of all-cause mortality by 30+%. It's like, oh, just by training, just by having 2 30-minute sessions in a week, which is very little, I can reduce my risk of dying by 30%, like substantial.
Welcome back to Recommended Daily Value. I'm your host, Tyler Woodward. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Austin Current, a retired IFBB pro bodybuilder, author, and fellow personal trainer. We start the conversation off by talking about Austin's history as a pro bodybuilder, and then we really dive into his experience transitioning out of bodybuilding, how his mindset around lifting has changed, and how he stayed motivated in the gym. And then we finally end with a fun conversation about how he would build his dream home gym, or how he has built his dream home gym. This is honestly one of my favorite episodes, if not my favorite episode to date, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. I'll see you in there. Austin Current, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Man. Oh, I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
Not too bad. Heard you're a little tired, but I'm gonna wake you up with some inspiring questions.
I am tired, but hopefully we have a coherent conversation and there's some nuggets to pull out of here.
I think we will definitely get some nuggets for sure. But so I was trying to do a little bit of research, and before coming on, I've obviously followed you for a long time. I did not know, you do not put this at all on your account. You were at the time the second youngest bodybuilder to achieve IFBB Pro.
Yeah, especially, well, physique, in the physique category, I was for sure. I know that for sure. In like open bodybuilding, I don't know for sure. But yeah, I the only person to beat me at the time was Jeff Side. Or Jeff
Oh,
Seed.
no way.
Yeah, it was basically me and him like neck and neck going for. He was the youngest one. The only other youngest one that I knew who was going for it at the time. This was back in 2013, 2014, and obviously he had a much bigger social following, at that time for sure. But I followed him, and not really for the sake of learning, but for the sake of like, oh, I know he's a young dude. He's got a great physique. I know he's going for his pro card. I know he's young. He's around my age. But I think he was like 8 months younger than me. But yeah, I was the second one in terms of the age, which was honestly a massive surprise for me at the time. I mean, obviously I had a lot going my way physique wise, and I made a good run at it, but like anything with these subjective competitions, it's right place, right time. And I think I nailed that down and I just got lucky.
I wouldn't say that. You've been lifting. How long have you been lifting for?
I've been lifting weights more structurally and consistently since I was 12. I can confidently say.
Okay.
At 12 is like when I first got into the gym, stepped into the gym. My brother kind of took me with him. He's a couple years older than I am, but he took me with him to the local YMCA down in Southern Indiana, and just he had me doing some bodyweight stuff, pull-ups, dips, push-ups, things like that. And we started to work on machines and stuff like that. He was learning how to lift through our school's strength conditioning program, which is at the time it had a very overqualified person in charge of it that I'm still in contact with today, who actually became one of my university professors and mentors. And so he's been with me. I've been with him, and we've known each other for a long time, really since I was going into junior high, so 7th grade, which would have been 13. So the first year was kind of just guidance from my brother, and I just caught that iron bug, right? And plus, you put a basketball gym next to the lifting gym, like that's my day. I'll go shoot around, play pickup, and then I'll go lift, and then I'll come back when there's an open game. And like, that's all I did for 10 years, So that's a big part of what kind of got me into it.
That's awesome. So pro bodybuilder at 19, started lifting when you were around 12. Like what drove you to get into working it as your living?
Yeah. So I officially turned pro when I was 20.
Okay.
I started competing when I was 19, but I officially turned that. It was 9 months. So I started when I was 19, my first show. And then 9 months into that was when I earned my pro card there in Pittsburgh. But really kind of what got me into all of this really was I didn't know what else I wanted to do, and I never really gravitated towards much in my younger years outside of sports or lifting weights. Anything that was outside of physical expression, I really didn't think about much or care much about. And I really didn't think that I had much going in that from an academic sense, because I didn't really at the time. Intellectually, I had yet to kind of tap in and learn how to engage with the more intellectual parts of myself and curiosities there. And it wasn't until those, sports and stuff like that, and all the time I was spending on with that, taking up my mind and physical energy, I then learned and was forced into, okay, what do I have upstairs? What do I got going on up there? And can I apply it? And I didn't know how to, there's just so many things I didn't really know how to learn. And once you learn how to learn, if you have enough capacity to kind of forge through that and stick with it and stay curious and stay open to that experience, like you honestly can do mostly anything. You can't do everything, as they say, right? But you can do anything that you put your mind to and engage with. So that's kind of how I stuck with it. And when I got into university, I originally was going for, when I was originally going to university, I started out like pre-med. I wanted to become a physician's assistant. I never want to be a doctor or anything like that, but I like to go through med school or anything like that. But physician's assistant seemed like a well-respected job with job security. That's, it's sort of a nurse practitioner equivalent in that regard, right? Maybe not one for one, but it's close in that you have the responsibilities and you get good pay and good job security and benefits and everything else. And you didn't have to go to med school. So I was like, yeah, great. I'll do that. And then, obviously I was lifting for a long time, very physical person. And then my second year university, I got talked into competing, which is kind of how I got into competing. I didn't want to do it. I actively ran away from any engagement with that sport or activity. But I had friends doing it that, were really good at it. And one in particular, Alicia, who was Miss Figure in Indiana for a couple of years in a row. And I respected her and I trusted her in that. She's like, dude, just try it. Like, this was when men's physique was first coming out. This is the emergence of, Steve Cook after the muscle male model search and that muscle and fitness thing, and that kind of, and then you have your Matt Christianers and all these guys who kind of started out this early men's physique thing back in the day. And that's, I kind of got wrapped up into it. And then I got talked into doing the Kentucky Muscle, which at the time, especially, it was the 5th largest regional show in the nation. And I got talked into doing that 6 weeks out and ended up winning.
Ooh.
And I won all the categories I entered in the men's physique, novice, collegiate, you name it. I just did well. And this was at a time when I didn't really know what else I was doing or had going on. So I was like, all right, this seems good. I'll keep doing this. I'm good at it. That's fun. And so, and then it was the first time I really kind of saw this cause and effect relationship happen in my more adult life, moving through school. Obviously, I'd first year university, I went from, probably a C average student to 4.0 basically. And I saw that cause and effect and I was like, oh, okay. So if I really try here and apply myself, like shit can happen. Cool. And then the physical part of that, I already knew how to engage with and take really far through sports. And so I was like, well, I can do that physically. That's not that hard. And dieting wasn't that hard for me. And getting into and staying in that kind of shape wasn't hard for me. And building muscle wasn't that hard for me because this lined up in a really great period where I was experiencing newbie gains because yes, I'd been lifting for a long time, but never for like physique enhancement, never to like body build. I only was lifting to increase sports performance. So I was very strong. I was very quick and powerful. Think like Olympic lifts and main lifts, things like that. But all these bodybuilding focused, like high volume stuff, like I just didn't have any experience with that. And you align newbie gains and puberty. Well, I mean,
it's a good recipe.
It's a recipe for success right there. So, and then thankfully I had good genetics to kind of put on muscle and all that. So, that's kind of what got me into all of this. And then, I'd spent all my time at the gym. So I was like, well, I'll just keep doing this and I'll start training clients because that's the only way to get a raise at this gym. So that's kind of what got me into it. And I just stayed with it.
That's awesome. So this is a weighted question. Obviously genetics plays some sort of role there, but like you were obviously lifting when you hear like, all right, he was 20, got his IFBB pro card. You're like, he must just be a freak. But obviously you were lifting for 8 years. Here's like you put in the work before that, and then you probably primed to put on muscle because you hadn't been doing so much muscle building. How much of a role do you think, like when you see these IFBB pros, obviously that like not everyone's gonna be C-bum, but how far do you think the average person can push their physique naturally?
It's a lot farther than you think. Honestly, like at this time too, considering it's all I cared about. And so, I mean, if it wasn't school, like I didn't do anything else. And so, I mean, I'm talking like working out twice a day, if I have some free time, to the point, like to an obsessive degree, really. And I don't necessarily mean that negatively. There's parts of it that became negative without a doubt. I got to the point where, a few years into it, I would leave family functions because I needed to go to the track and like do sprints and run stadiums. And like, I became really obsessive and neurotic about it. But also like it built a really crazy physique, and took me far within that sport. And so I think, if you approach something, I was also approaching it as a professional. I was like, I want to be a professional at this and I want to show up in this way. This is what I want to do as of right now. And I saw promise within that, and I had control over it, which for me at that time, I had little control over most things in my life, it felt like. So if I could control this, well, then that's great. And so I had a high level of dedication and effort towards it. But I think there's a lot of things that, we may think about a lot and dedicate a lot of mental energy to it. But very, very few times do we dedicate as much physical effort towards it. And at that time, like I was doing both. And I think that was a powerful recipe. And I mean, I'd go from, I'd get off work at 10 p.m. I'd lift, let's say from 10:30 to midnight. Just my day, a normal lift, and then go home. And then I'd be back in the gym probably 5 or 6 in the morning that next morning, training again. And like, I obviously had some sleep issues then too, but like, it was one of those things where that was my first thing I thought of. Like when I woke, if my eyes were open and I was awake, I'm going to go to the gym. Like if I have nowhere else to be, I'm going to be at the gym. And so physically, I think you have to really, really dedicate yourself to that if that's what you want. But I think a lot of people can take their natural physique really, really far. And I think there's the time horizon component to it, right? So for some, it's going to come a bit quicker, especially for me. I was doing most of this building of all this muscle tissue and this physique again during puberty, during those years where I was already kind of going to do that anyways, but I was just, I put like a multiplier to it.
Plus you had spent years of like developing that skill, doing more Olympic lifting and other styles. And then timing was perfect with all those hormones, and then transitioning to bodybuilding.
Yeah. I mean, I had such a good foundation, right? So, to answer your question, more directly, I think people can take their natural physique really, really far, if they give themselves enough time, and I know, I've seen people throughout my career now that really don't hit a physical peak until their 30s and 40s, and so when you're in your 20s and you're like, well, I guess I got to do the next thing. It's like, you still had 2 decades really where you probably had a lot to give, and you just got impatient, which I don't blame anyone for that. But to say that you didn't, to say you gave it the time that it needed is also not true. Right. So, yeah, I think you can take it really far.
One of the things that I've been focusing on with like my business is just like turning pro. I forget what the author's name is, but basically just treating it like I'm trying to become a professional content creator or whatever that is, like doing the work just to do the work, not necessarily seeing the reward.
Steven Pressfield, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I need to read his book, The War of Art and Turning Pro. Have you read them? Yeah.
There are things that I try and reread as much as I possibly can. They're easy they're very basic concepts, like fighting the resistance, right? But in Turning Pro, it's like these two things where they show up daily in my life, right? The thing that I want to do that I know is going to give me joy and happiness and success, and the thing that I want success in is also the thing that a part of my mind really fights against and sometimes wins, and so, for the past couple of years, I feel like it's won more often than not, which can put me in a weird place, and in different situations that I don't necessarily want to be in. So yeah, I think those are powerful, simple, but yet powerful tools.
That's cool. Yeah, definitely gonna have to read those. So one of my questions going off that though is, when does it go too far? So obviously I believe you've struggled, like you kind of got fallen out of the love of lifting. You maybe you peaked a little bit too early with your bodybuilding physique. Like, why do you think you're still not stepping on the stage? And do you ever have any desire to step back on the stage?
I don't. It was the best thing for me at that time. And I truly believe that. And I'm really, really grateful for the lessons I learned during that. I'm really grateful for the person I became during that. It also came at a time, as I previously mentioned, that I didn't feel like I had much control over my life in many ways, but that physical part of it, I had all of the control, and I took it. I tracked everything I ate. I, again, training twice a day, like spent every waking hour. If I wasn't working or in class, like I was focused on and very intentional on what I was doing. And again, like I think I was just searching for control when I didn't necessarily have it. But I also really learned how to stick with something, how to work really, really hard at something, how to truly like turn pro at something and show up every day with that intention, and, there's videos on it's my 21st birthday and I'm on the step mill making a video, like turned 21 today, but like, I got to get this done before I go. I didn't even want to do anything. I just wanted to lift and like lift with my friends, and I ended up working out alone, doing cardio for an hour alone. And I'm grateful that my family wanted to do this now, but at the time they wanted to drink. They wanted me to drink. They wanted me to loosen up a bit. I didn't want to. And so I showed up, but I didn't drink. I didn't eat anything. I watched all of them eat and drink. And then I left and did the thing I wanted to go do, So it's like, so, I mean, there's so many parts of it that I'm really, really grateful for. And ultimately, like, the person I became and the trajectory it took me on in my career, professionally, I don't think I ever would have found myself if I wasn't who I was and became who I became within the sport, and had some success there. So it got me opportunity that I don't think I otherwise would have gotten. And it also gave me confidence to ask for opportunity that I don't think I would have ever asked for. I found myself, 2016, I found myself, I was the first intern ever at MI40 gym during like the golden era of that gym, when everyone hadn't disassembled yet, we'll say. And that was the greatest summer for my career. I mean, that I truly got to shadow some of the best trainers in the world for an entire summer, 6 days a week, and I took full advantage. And it, again, like, gave me more opportunities that I don't think I would have been given if I didn't have that. Right. So there's this domino effect and this snowball effect of just this opportunity through serendipity, this opportunity through engaging with the process of doing the thing. And the more you do that, and the more you show up to that, I think opportunity does show itself. And as we all learn, you have to be ready for the opportunity when it comes. There's opportunities that come to me, one being something that we're probably going to talk about, but there's more opportunities that have come my way that I couldn't take advantage of because I wasn't prepared for. And that stings. And I don't like the feeling of that. And so there's a big part of me that I don't know what's to come, but I know I want to be ready for it when it happens. Yeah. And I think competing taught me how to do that.
That's awesome. So one of the things I'm really curious about for you is, do you think you've achieved your peak physique in your life? Or do you think, like, your 20-year-old IFBB pro that, like, and that's also, subjective, right? Because you were probably miserable when you stepped on stage. Like, no one's having fun. You were probably pretty stressed out, not sleeping much just because it's the nature of bodybuilding. But, you got some cool pictures, right?
Yeah. My last prep, honestly, it was the best I ever looked, but it was also the easiest prep I think I had. That doesn't mean it wasn't hard. It was very hard, but I think it was the easiest prep I ever had. I was engaged at the time, and it was my last show. I knew it was my last show. And so going into it, knowing it was my last show, I approached it that way. I'm going out with a bang. I am not leaving any stone unturned here. But I also did loosen up. And it was probably the healthiest I ever was. It was the biggest and leanest I'd ever been. And it was the happiest emotionally I'd ever been. And so all at the same time, right? And so there's so much, and I was also finishing school. So I graduated too that year. So like all of those, and then I got married, and then I moved to Australia, and like all of these things, like all these things lined up so well. And I understood what was happening. And also when you're doing all of those things at once, like there's not enough time to think about it too much. You just kind of, what you have to do and you do it. And some days feel triumphant. Some days feel demoralizing. Some days feel like kind of null, and that's fine. But nonetheless, you're still showing up and doing the thing that you should be doing. And so I don't know the answer to that, right? That comes down to my decisions from here on out, right? And the last few years, I have really struggled with training in many ways. And there's been a lot of things there that have weighed on that. But I've had to form a different relationship with training than I had, which has been a transition. And I think it's a transition for anyone who, spent any time within the kind of the sphere of bodybuilding and competition, especially one that's so physique driven. I think you have to, when you step away from it, I think you do have to start to reframe what the relationship with that is. And I feel the best I have since I've stopped competing. And now it's almost 6 years ago. So, I've been working through some stuff, and that isn't to say I haven't been, I'm a strong muscular guy. Like I know that, and
Everyone still knows you lift.
yeah, like you're not going to be mistaken and be like, this dude runs marathons and doesn't lift weights at all. And it's like, that's not true, but all that to say, I don't know the answer to that question. I would say that's the biggest and leanest consistently that I will be in my life. Probably yes. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So going off that, and the reason I asked that question is, for me, my mindset has always been, I'm going to work my ass off in the gym. I don't have any desire to step on stage, but every time I go in the gym, it's like, all right, I'm gonna get a little bit better today, hopefully yielding a better physique in the long run. What is it like for you in that mental transition, knowing that maybe you haven't, but you kind of have reached your peak in some ways? Like you might not take a picture next year or 10 years from now and like see a better physique, see a better version of yourself. Is that a tough transition?
I think it has been. I think I've ignored it for a long time, and I haven't acknowledged it. But clearly it's been something. It's been 6 years, right? So, and I'm still thinking about it. We're still talking about it. So it's clearly something. And I think now I don't think I'm on the other side of it necessarily, but I think I've created a better relationship with it. I think it was something that was sort of an enemy for a while, and it was an adversary at least. And I didn't really know how to be friends with that. And I think now I've become better friends with what that relationship is the best way I can kind of put it into words. And I'm good with that. And there's a part of me too that also understands the just overall impact of my health when it comes to lifting weights consistently, right? And I'm not a child anymore. It's not the phase of life I'm in anymore, and I think no matter who you are, you're always going to have this tie back to whatever the glory days were for you physically. We all kind of like reference that, whether you reference it ad nauseum and become a total tool and douche is a different story. But there's always something, right? It's always something of like, yeah, I used to X, Y, and Z.
You're Everest, right?
Yeah, it's you climbed it and you stood on top of it. You put your flag down and you're like, I did it. And it felt great. And now you have to sort of come to reality of, well, that's out of my life now. Like, I don't think I'll step on stage again. I have no ambitions to. I'm really grateful that I had that again. I'm really grateful for that period of my life, but I'm also really grateful that it's over. I've helped competitors to the Olympia stage. I've worked with people who, are more well known in that sphere. And it's just, even more recently, a month ago, I helped someone earn their pro card, and it's like, but there's no part of me that's like, ooh, I love it. I can't wait. It's like, I'm purely now in the coaching seat of I had that. Now I can help you get there, and I can be a collaborator in that. But there's really no part of me that's like, man, I miss it.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, including myself, and I'm sure you, suffer a little bit with maybe not clinical body dysmorphia, but we always think worse than we we think we look worse than we actually do. I go to Armbrust in Denver, which I'm sure you've been to.
Oh yeah.
And everyone there is a meathead, like like some people don't fit through doors kind of thing. And then I go to like a regular commercial gym, and you're like, wow, I'm not a small person, and comparatively, because everyone's just so big there. What would be the advice you give maybe to your past self, trying to reconcile how you feel now versus how you felt then, but also to the average person? It's like, you're putting in the work, and you're probably, I don't know. Are you picking up what I'm putting down, I guess?
Yeah, no, I am. I think that, so Armbrust, I used to train there when I lived more in Denver in the city. And that's where I used to train more consistently. And Armbrust is one of those places, and these bodybuilding gyms, it's kind of coined as the Mecca of the Rockies,
The Mile High Mecca.
Mile High Mecca, right? Yeah. It's the Mecca of this region. And it certainly attracts the Mecca of physiques, right? It certainly attracts those all-time best physiques, some of the best physiques you're going to see in your whole life. And they're there in numbers, and it's, imagine like all the craziest physiques you saw today on Instagram. If you're in that sphere of Instagram, imagine now all those people train at your gym, because that's what that gym is. And then you go, as you said, like you go to the Anytime Fitness down the street, and you're there with,
bunch of normies.
Yeah. Like school teachers, and like just a bunch of people who are there literally to be healthy, and because they know they should do it. And those are two separate experiences, and it's sort of like, there's also that thing of, you have to reframe, and you have to understand the context of the world you're existing in. Right. And I think we all get in our heads about this part of, if you've, when you get into lifting, you sort of sign the contract of, when you get into lifting, especially to look better, and if your goal is to build muscle, and especially if you get into bodybuilding at all, or at least within the culture of bodybuilding, you sort of sign this unwritten contract of, I'm forever dissatisfied with the way that I look, and not like completely, but there's obviously a large continuum there, but you're at least on the continuum wherever you exist on it. Right. And so you're in that culture, you're in that sphere. And I think the best thing you can do is learn how to remove yourself from it at any given time, and understand the context of where you're at, and reframe that. Because again, like you walk into let's keep Armbrust as the example, right? You walk into that gym, you're instantly small, you're instantly weak, you're instantly the most average person at that gym, right? Even if you have an impressive physique, like if you're not a world-class bodybuilder, like you're an average person at that gym. You just are. But then again, you go to Anytime Fitness. Well, you may be the biggest guy there, you may be the most in shape, at least one of the most in shape people at that gym, right? And so that reframes it instantly there, which is helpful, right? That's not a knock to anyone at the Anytime. That's not even a kudos necessarily to anyone at Armbrust. That's just the reality of the situation. And the same, on the same coin, it's like you go to any beach in the US, like if you lift weights and are somewhat healthy and somewhat in shape and reasonably or relatively lean, like you probably have one of the best physiques on that beach that you're going to see on that beach, no matter how long you spend there. And so understanding the context of that situation, and being able to understand the framing of that, I think is really, really important. And that's something that I wasn't able to do for a long time. But now it's like conversations that I have with clients. It's you're comparing again, we have these conversations on social media all the time. It's like you're comparing yourself. If you're only comparing yourself to the people you look up to on Instagram, like well, that's a far out concept. Like it's an impossible feat, and you're consistently going to be dissatisfied with that. But if you compare yourself just with the average of the people you spend, like actually you're spending your life around in your community, like you're in good shape. Like you're fine. You're doing great. Keep going. Like don't get down on yourself there. So I think it's a framing thing. And I think you have to learn how to remove yourself from it if you're in it.
How do you level that though? So it's like, I always want to look better. I always want to look like C-Bomb or whatever, but I also understand that, I look decent. I'm pretty good. I've done the work. Chris Williamson gives the example that the average American man it's like still lives in his mom's basement or something, like makes under 10,000 or has under 10,000 days in the week, $10,000 in the bank. And I'm probably paraphrasing, but it's basically like, if you go to the gym 3 times a week, you have a decent income, you don't live in your mom's basement, like you are more than above the average.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a concept that, Sam Harris talks a lot about, and it's this marriage and this consistent relationship you have with being and becoming. And you have to understand that's never going to go away. And you have to learn how to exist with that, both versions of that person, of you, right? You have to.
It's like what I could be and what I'm becoming.
It's just who you are and what you could become, and to be in it. Again, it's the concepts are easy, but the actual execution of that's very hard, and it takes daily practice. It's similar to like meditation. You explain what meditation is. Oh, that seems simple enough. But if you've ever meditated, you realize that this is quite a challenging thing to do consistently, especially, and to do it to the point where it's productive for you, right? It's a challenging thing. But it's still something worth pursuing. It's still something worth engaging with. And so I think it's understanding that you are who you are and you're where you're at because of choices and because of circumstance and because of whatever internal and external influence that's led you to that moment. But you also have the capacity to be more. And I think that it can feel like a prison, but I don't think it should. I think it, and trust me, I'm more or less like speaking to myself here. But it shouldn't, it can feel like a prison, but don't really try not to allow it to, because to me, it's like the ultimate freedom.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I am this, but I also can be so much more. And what else is the point of what we're doing here? Like, if you had everything you've ever wanted, what's the point of doing anything else? Like, you're not, it's the same, it's the celebrity trope. It's, for some reason, we have to climb that mountain on our own to realize that, in fact, it's not what we wanted. But in reality, it's actually who we became on the way there. And you have to realize that. But again, you're going to spend we're all going to spend our entire lives pursuing the thing that we think we want the most, just to figure out, if we ever get there, that in fact it wasn't what we wanted. And that's just the reality.
It's a big paradox.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting because one of the issues I'd say with social media, it's basically like your concentrated arm thrust, right? Because arm thrust in real life didn't exist till 20 years ago. But you're just constantly looking at these people that are the pinnacle of physiques versus, you really need to take the time to look at how far you've come with your own, let's say, physique. We can apply it to any manner of life or thing that pursuit. But, when you compare yourself to the average, which is hard to do, you really have to intentionally do it. Like, you have to go to the Anytime Fitness and be like, okay, like I've done well. But there's always the occasional person that you should strive for. And when you see them once in a while, it's probably fine. You're like, I can keep working, keep doing better. But when you see them all the time, it becomes very convoluted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's messy, man. It's, and there's not going to be a balance to it. I think that the world's not set up for you. Not set up for anybody. We're all just here and experiencing what we experience, and it's up to you to deal with that. and learn how to cope with it and learn how to exist within it. And that's what we're all trying to do. We're all wrestling with our own demons and insecurities and fears, and to think that you're exempt from that pursuit is quite insane. So just understand that you're not alone, and you're not a part of the minority there. Like, you are the majority, and you're in the same boat everyone else is, regardless of status and means or whatever. It's like everyone's got their stuff, man. And however you need to frame it, and just continue to show up and understand there's that balance between being and becoming, being who you are and being the best version of that, but also understanding that you can become something more, and to be kind and compassionate and empathetic to those around you, and try not to be a stain on the community that you live in. It's like, I think it's as complex as it gets, so I just try and stay out of prison.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly.
Basically.
Yeah.
If you can do that, you're pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, shit, dude. In terms of like the worst things that can happen to you, it's like, there's some bad things, man. And the time we live in is pretty great, right? We all have, if you're listening to this, you have running water, you have unlimited availability to food.
You have cellular data, so you can listen to this podcast.
Yeah, dude. Like, you have what most of human history always wanted and can never even fathom. And it's just a different set of problems, right? And it's sort of like Mark Manson talks a lot about this, but it's like it's choosing your struggle, right? We all struggle, and either you choose it or it chooses you. And I've been on both sides of that, and I can promise you, you want to choose it.
Yeah. So you leaned very much away from like professional bodybuilding, I would say, stepping on stage, and more towards general gym goer content, trying to help the average person. What drove that?
I spent most of my career up to this point really focused on the 1%, and really focused on the most nuanced, the most complex, like the most what seems complicated, but really isn't information. But really, again, I've picked it apart, right? And a lot. And I existed in spheres that, you're always trying to be better and optimize. And you lose, because you've covered your bases, you have that luxury, right? And I think that's just a part of getting older and maturing and realizing and becoming more in tune with the reality of what's around you. It's, you see your grandparents get older, you see your parents get older, you see those that you love get older and start to lose functions that you've always taken for granted. You may even start to lose functions that you took for granted, right? Capabilities that you took for granted. And that reality is something that most of the world faces, right? And I mean, conservative estimate is 80% of people don't do it, right? 80% of the people in the world don't do enough to be healthy, right? They don't move. They don't eat healthy, right? To any semblance of a threshold of what they should. And for a lot of people, it's a confusing battle that they consistently face every single day. Like, what is important? How do I dedicate enough time to it, but not so much that it detracts away from everything else that truly means more to me? And I came from a place where that's all I cared about, and I had a luxury to only care about that, really. And then I got into a job and profession to where I was rewarded for only caring about it, and you really become detached from, again, reality of truly what's around you. And traveling a lot, helps. I've been very fortunate to be able to travel, all around the world, and, spend time in, 15, 16 plus countries, and speak to normal people when you're going about your day. And you see you hear about normal people problems. You hear about people who haven't dedicated their life to it, what they struggle with. And you're like, huh, yeah, that's pretty simple, actually. You just do these, stack these things and make these decisions and clean up this environment a bit. And yeah, man, the best decision becomes easier to make. And that is obvious to you. But you have enough of these conversations and you see that light bulb start to flicker a little bit. And for some, that light bulb starts to burn bright. And you're like, huh, I really helped that person. That's cool.
Yeah.
And to spend time and actually help those people who actually need the help, to me, it's been a lot more rewarding than taking someone who has pretty close to the best physique they're ever going to have and is continuously dissatisfied with it and consistently wants to argue with you about what's better or worse to get 1% better, although they're 99% there. And it's like, I did that for so long. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, kind of,
Yeah.
And that isn't, I'm not detracting from the importance of those conversations. I'm not detracting from the importance of the thought leaders and innovators who are leading that pursuit, right? Because without that, we don't grow as an industry. We don't grow as a profession, right? We don't continue to ask good questions, and we don't continue to figure new things out and new approaches out. But it's to understand that so many people, and most people you run into every single day throughout your normal life, really, really struggle with the things that couldn't come easier to you. And there's a part of me that gets fulfillment and feels a purpose towards sharing that a little bit and taking some of that burden off that person, right? And if I can give someone a little bit more control in their physical life, like, I know what that feels like. I've gone through that.
Mm-hmm.
I went through that when I was 19. I started going through that when I was 19 years old, right? With bodybuilding. I discovered the control I could have over that physical part of my life and really transform my life for the better, and what effect that truly had in every other part of my life. And when you see a lot of people struggle with that and don't connect the dots, and you're like, the dots are connected for you. They're so clear, right? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. But for them, they're still in the dark. Some people are living in just pitch black, and they're trying to find their way in this abyss, right? And if you can be that person that can just turn some lights on for them so they can start to see, yeah, that's awesome. And so I think that has been a really big transition for me. And just seeing that transformation in people is an intoxicating thing, and it's reinforcing, and you're making a really big difference in people's lives, and you could be the difference between what you share with them, whether it's through a coaching relationship or even a conversation or a piece of content or whatever, like, or a series of pieces of content over, 6-month, 12-month period in their life could be the difference between them truthfully being around for their family. You hear, there's stories like this every day people die from very preventable diseases that ultimately they didn't have to die from because they were living in this darkness. They were living in this unknown. And there's that part of me that's like, let me help you a little bit. you know, you don't have to pay, whether you pay me or not. Like I have some things that aren't that difficult for me to share that could ultimately really change your life. And I don't know what else I'd spend my time doing, honestly.
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. I would kind of like to see you speak a little bit more to that online. Just like, cause I know there's so many things that we could, and you know, you don't have to take my criticism, but cause there's so many
I'm
things
here
that
for all feedback, dude. I'm sort of lost at the moment. Like, what do I talk about? What's my, again, I'm kind of searching for it. You probably see me floundering a bit online. It's just kind of like, where am I going? And it feels that way. So no, I appreciate, and I'm very receptive to any and all feedback.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like, cause what I see you as, cause I think you make some of the best exercise technique content online. My genius $1 billion business idea for you is you need to get QR codes and have them on each machine so people can
Actually,
just look up.
have that idea. I already have that idea.
There we go.
Yeah.
But it's like, all right. So like, you know, you just posted a video of the leg extension and the hamstring curl the other day. It's a great video. But if someone doesn't have the context, if you're trying to reach the average person, they don't have the context of why they should be in the gym, because we know that, you know, Alzheimer's disease, you can make huge improvements just through exercise, like insulin sensitivity directly improved through growing muscle. So if you have the context of like, you know, you don't need to be Pia Tia, like driving into the glute 4 mechanisms and all that good stuff. But it's just like, if you can make it apparent that what you're missing out from not exercising, and then it's like, all right, here's how you do it. Now I'm showing you the tunnel. It's kind of what you said, right? Like the bodybuilder, you're getting to the 99th yard line, hoping to cross the end zone. With the average person, you can just show them the game. So it's like, okay, here's why you should be in the game. And then here's your first 10 plays. And then you can see huge progress from that.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I appreciate that. That's really helpful. And I've been wrestling with that for a while. And really, ultimately, since I published my book, it's because my book really was guided towards that point. And that process of writing that was where you really saw me make that transition mentally. Because I was falling out of love with talking about stuff in such detail and with such nuance, right? And that's, again, not to discredit any of that stuff, but I just didn't see as much of a point to it anymore, right? And for me, like, I know I've said it a lot in this conversation, but once I see something, I can't unsee it, right? And that's kind of with anyone, but I seem to have these endless loops in my head that never turn off if I don't pursue them and engage with them, right? And they're always just there running in the background. And for me, it was like I always had these loops of every time I talk about something that was kind of guided or created for that 1%, in the back of my mind, I'm like, this doesn't matter. What am I doing? None of this, like, who cares? You know, like, yeah, it matters to somebody, but to the global like globally, like, does it matter?
Yeah, it's almost irrelevant.
It's so irrelevant, you know, because to me it's irrelevant. But I've also seen this. I've climbed the mountain, and until you've gotten there, put your stake on Everest, like you're constantly in pursuit of it, right? And there's so much to be gained from that. And I'm never going to discredit someone for that and tell them not to pursue it. But there's so many people, again, the people you run into, go outside, and literally the next 10 people you run into probably are dealing with something that is preventable. If they just understood, as you said, they understood that they need to be in the game. And here's a general playbook on how to play it. You'll get better as you go. And if I can be the one to teach you, great. If I'm not, I at least introduced it to you. I think that's a beautiful thing. And the book helped me with that transition a little bit, and getting emails from readers of the book, that are, most of the emails I get are from people in their 50s, 60s, 70s who are like, I got your book. I've been lifting. It's completely changed my life. It's so great. And it's like, that fills me up so much more than like, bro, I can't seem to figure out this alignment. I can't seem to figure out how to get another inch in my bicep. It's like, dude, you already have 16-inch arms. Like, you're doing great. Keep going. Don't struggle with this so much. It's not a big deal. You're checking the boxes you need to check. Now, take some of this anxiety and take some of this angst and put it into other areas of your life, probably. But that's for them to figure out.
I was talking to Brian Thomas last week, and he's very into neuroscience. And one of the things he was telling me is that what they believe right now is that the brain's prerogative is movement, like how you move in the world. So even when you consider that like walking or movement in general is what your brain is designed to do, is designed to like figure out if you need to run away from the tiger or, go cook some pancakes or whatever. It's like, so if you're not moving, like it's not to like have these stupid podcasts. It's not to read a book. It's like your brain's main function is to move. So if you are just, and my grandfather is a really, really smart guy. And obviously I'm just joking. I love podcasts, obviously, but genius, like a historian, like really smart guy, but he does not leave his computer. And I'm like, Grandpa, you don't need to lift weights inherently. He's 80, like obviously would be great, but like you need to walk or you're going to lose both your ability to walk. And when you lose your ability to walk, you're going to lose this too.
And so my grandfather famously said to me years ago, I asked him if he wanted to go on a walk. And his famous words were, I only have so many heartbeats. Why waste them? And I was like, man, that is just the worst way to look at that. Like, that's not how that works, dude.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I could say. I was like, Grandpa, that's not how that works. Like, literally by moving, you get more of them. Right. Like, you access more of life when you engage with that process, right? You're actually, by not engaging with it, you're shutting off access to any more life that you could be gaining, right? And again, it's just these paradoxes we live within. It's just that we wrestle with. And it's just a mismatch of what we're built for and what we currently live in, and we're complex, but we're not that complex in terms of what we need. You need movement, you need nourishment, you need shelter, you need social connection and safety.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you need.
It's also difficult too, because so many people take the perspective that the easiest analogy to ever explain humans or life in general is like a car or something like that, some kind of machine. But cars, like that, it's called the rate of living theory, where it's like you have an X number of heartbeats, and they think that's how we die. And for the audience, and it's just so the opposite. Like that's exactly how your car works. Like you put some better gasoline, you'll get some more miles in, but like eventually you're gonna have a broken part and the car's gonna die. It's like that's the opposite of how humans work. It's like we regenerate. You put a stress, we adapt to it. Obviously, like at some point we're going to have our gears clogged up and things like that, and our ability to adapt to certain things will be limited. But the better you get at strength training, you're continually going to be able to adapt, and like you'll be able to survive longer, get those machines grooving for a longer period of time.
Yeah, you're harder to kill, man. You're harder to kill in every aspect, physically, mentally, emotionally. You're truly more resilient form of biology on this planet. And again, like preaching to the choir here, but it's a worthy pursuit. However you engage with that, just engage with that. Like, I don't care how you do it. I just care that you do it. Mm-hmm. Is kind of what I usually say, but it's important. And as you said, it's the main thing that our brain knows how to do. And you feel rewarded by it. Like, you feel, when has anyone gone on a walk and been like, oh, I feel worse now? Like, probably,
never. You fell.
Like, yeah, like I'm not going to say never, but it's very rare that you'd go on a walk, see the sun, breathe fresh air, connect with the earth, and you're like, man, I feel like crap after that. I need to sit in front of a screen now to feel better.
Need at least an hour of TikTok.
Yeah, it's like, dude, that's just not it. It's not reality. And we've been tricked into thinking that it is by different incentives, right? And And great, the world evolves, but you have to learn how to live within those frameworks that's best for you, not what's best for the thing you're fueling.
Yeah. So I actually have your book at home. It's I'm back in Jersey. I would highly recommend anyone pick it up if you're looking to level up your gym game. But what inspired you to write that?
I got asked to write it. So the publisher approached me in 2019. I was flying home for the holidays, 2019, December. And I was getting on a plane, got an email was like, book proposal, Science of Strength Training. And if you ask any of the authors of this series, we all have the same kind of storyline of, we almost deleted the email. We thought it was fake. We thought it was just another promotional email that you get as someone who engages with social media. Here's something, please advertise our thing. We'll give you $5. We'll give you exposure, whatever, right? But that's not what it was, right? It was a legit offer from a legit publisher, DK Publishing, which is a subsidiary of Penguin Random House. And it was ultimately, I think, a blessing in disguise for me. It really helped kind of get me out of a place where I didn't know how to get myself out of on my own, and change trajectories a bit and change the way I thought about it, because they wanted a certain book, and they wanted to target a certain audience. And again, that was more of the average everyday gym goer, right? The person who's actually going to be buying a book like this. And so, I had the challenge. I was tasked with the challenge of how do you figure this out? How do you put the right things in there? And you have a finite amount of space. What's important? What's not? Make the best of it. And here's our entire team at your disposal. And so it's just like, okay, what do I do with this? I don't know what to do with this. And so I just took it, it was day by day, week by week, month by month. And I was very grateful for it. And I'm still very grateful for it. And it's been an extremely cool thing. But yeah, they asked me to write it. And so it was kind of up to me. I tried to talk them out of it. I actually pitched them other people. I was like, you guys sure you want me to do it? I got several people on the top of my head right now that would be better to write this book, I think, who are more qualified per se. And they were like, no, we've done our research. Like we're doing our jobs. Like we want you to do it. And we like the way. So the ironic thing, for really anyone listening, but especially professionals here that are in the training space, but really this applies to everyone. But the thing that I was always docked in kind of got red marks for the way that I wrote. I always got counted off for being too conversational. I always got counted off for not being formal enough, even in my academic writing in school. Because even when I would write academically, it would be more conversational, because that's how I talk and that's how I think. That's how I write. And that was always something that was not advantageous for me in the more institutionalized academic spheres. But ironically, it was the thing that attracted the publisher the most to what I do and how I do it. And it was sort of that final straw of like, no, yeah, we love it. You bring the science into it, but you don't get lost in that. And you use that as a supporting role, not necessarily the main character. Which, when you're speaking to people who don't have the vocabulary and background of this information, like that's crucial. And I think many communicators get lost in that, because we're trying to impress our colleagues, or we're trying to prove to ourselves that we are smart enough or, adequate. And I had to really get over the fact of, well, this might not sound very impressive to my colleagues, but it's certainly going to help some folks who need it. And once I started to really kind of just lean into that, that kind of shaped the book. And I think the book is kind of spoke for itself in that regard. I mean, it's been one of the best selling weight training books across the US, Australia, Germany, South Korea, over the last 2 years. So it's like, okay, yeah, sweet. It clearly did something right. And so now I'm just trying to continue that a little bit and find my voice within it.
Yeah, it turned out really great. And you wouldn't think that a book, at least on the outside, you wouldn't think a book could be a great resource for lifting because it's so three-dimensional. But you did very well with the writing, and then they killed it with the drawing. So it's a great match. Like, it ends up working out very well.
Yeah, the CGI illustrations are next level. I mean, they're top tier. And again, that's all credit to the publisher. But every CGI illustration you see in the book is a photo that my wife took of me. So we also shout out to Prime Fitness. We flew to their headquarters in Pennsylvania, and we were there for 3 or 4 days, and we took over 1,000 images. So basically every exercise that you see represented in the book, we took from 3 different angles or 3 different positions at 3 different angles. So it was like, here's a front on view, here's a 45-degree view, here's a back view of this one exercise. Here's the beginning of the rep, the middle of the rep, the end of the rep, from all of these different angles. And we did that for every single exercise.
Wow.
And then from that, the illustrator was able to, again, generate the image, computer generate that image. And then I went through the process of all the main lifts you'll see in the book this is at this part of the rep, the muscle is lengthening under load. It's shortening under load. It's in an isometric contraction here. I had to do that for every single one of those. Like, every single muscle represented, I had to go through each individual phase of that lift and say, these little tiny muscles are isometric. These little tiny muscles are shortening. These big muscles are lengthening. It's like, it was a lot of work, man. But I think it came out to really be worth the time, because I think it really draws a clear picture of what it all is. And those images also went through a very strenuous and somewhat neurotic period of being picked apart, because a lot of I was getting sent these batches of CGI illustrations, 10, 15 at a time, and 5 to 10 at a time, let's say. And I'd have to go through and be like, okay, this foot position needs to be here. This line of pull needs to be here. Right now, the cable's not going through this. We need the cable to align with the arm path. We need the cable to align with this part of the body. And it was really just kind of tinkering with these images over the course of months, while I was doing the other writing and researching for the book. And again, it kind of seems, it's one of those things where it's like, it seems so simple, but there's so much to be represented there that I'm proud of. And it would not have been possible without the publisher. Like, there's no way I would have ever finished it on my own without the accountability of the publisher. I'll tell you that right now. But 2, like, without the resources of the publishers and the skill set of those, the illustrators and the editors and everyone that really kind of helped me create life from that book, like, it wouldn't have happened.
That's awesome. So here's a hard one for you. Not that we've been doing any easy questions today. But, where does the book rank in comparison to your peak show, in terms of like how proud you are of it?
I think the book certainly surpasses. In terms of what I'm proud of in my life and in terms of what I'm proud of the most in my professional career, like, the book certainly is top. It's certainly the hardest thing I've ever done. It's the biggest project I've ever worked on. it's work that doesn't necessarily come as natural to me. Again, I've never been known as a writer ever. Any good grades I ever got in a writing class is because I spent hours and hours every single week in a writing lab with a tutor, picking apart how terrible my writing is. So like I remember my wife is a phenomenal writer, like just naturally a phenomenal writer and grammatically on point. Like she understands all of that stuff. And I remember when we met and we were living together, I remember I was trying to write like this Instagram post, and I was really trying to get better at writing. And it was just writing my captions. I was like trying to better understand punctuation and sentence structure. Cause like I never truly learned it. You know, when I was supposed to learn that stuff in school, I just wasn't paying attention. I didn't care. It didn't matter to me. And so all the things that you should ideally learn in junior high and high school, like I had no idea. You know, I truthfully deserved every bad grade I got in writing and in grammar. Like I just didn't really have it. And so like, you know, here I am in my mid 20s reading this encyclopedia book that my grandmother got my brother and I when we were in junior high, that would just happen to be on our shelves, you know, just because it took up space on a shelf. We didn't want to throw it away because our grandmother got it. You know, it's one of those sets of books that they were used to sell back in the 90s, right? That are early 2000s. That's like an A to Z encyclopedia of all of these different topics and whatever. And it's like, I was reading that, man. I was like, how do I truly form a good structure to a sentence and put punctuation? Where do commas go? Where do colons go? Like, I don't know, you know?
Yeah.
And it's been a pursuit, you know? And so something that the physical stuff came very natural to me. That's the only thing I've ever truly understood, I think, in my life, to the degree that I can understand it. But everything else has been, you know, something I've really had to try hard at. And the book married those two. And I think that was a beautiful, beautiful thing.
That's great. Yeah. It's funny. I think it's so important to teach things with context. Like I took organic chemistry when I was in school, and they just teach it very like theoretically. And it's just like so irrelevant. It's like, dude, I'm just memorizing these equations. There's no really principles, at least the way they taught it to me, where you can just understand everything. So it's like every time it's a puzzle piece. Now I love chemistry. Like I'm looking into nutrition and things like that. And it's like, wow, I want to go back into organic chemistry so I can actually apply these things.
With context. Yeah. It's very fun.
Yeah. And that's the same thing with writing. I didn't realize how important grammar was till I was writing, using a teleprompter for making certain videos and trying to write the scripts for it. And you're like, holy shit, now I understand why it's important to have periods in the right places.
Yeah, dude, commas in the right places, like in dashes, like you name it, dude. It's very like even parenthetical statements, like all of these things are things that you just naturally pick up when you speak, right? And you get better at speaking and communicating a message through the verbal, through verbally speaking. But when you have to write it down, it gets a bit complicated, right? And again, I think reading helps a lot. And being able to just understand kind of the importance of those things when you're communicating a message. But I anytime I do a voiceover, it's I've already written it down. I'm basically just reading from a script that I've written, and it's when you're writing that, it's important because like when you write it and you're reading through it in your head and you're like, yeah, that sounds good, and then you go to record it the first take and you're like, oh, I did not write that well.
Breathe the whole time.
I didn't breathe the whole time. I didn't space that out right. There needs to be a comma here. I need to space this. And it's like, you start to really understand the importance of that and why they're professionals in that area, you know, to even write what goes on a teleprompter like that comes from a professional person who spent a lot of time honing their craft.
Yeah. Any interest for a second book?
Yeah, man, I'd love to write another book. It's trying to land on kind of what that is. I think fortunately this book kind of filled a gap in the market of where there necessarily wasn't a book. I think it bridged the gap between textbooks and more chapter based books that weren't visual, and I think this really kind of, it's an adult picture book in a big way. But it's ultimately, it's a textbook written for the everyday person rather than the academic, right? So textbooks aren't written for the everyday person to read, like same as research. All of those things are written for, they're essentially written for colleagues, and they're written for students to learn how to communicate like their colleagues. Like that's it. I mean, that's that whole way of writing and communicating. And so, one thing I've really tried to get better at in my career is again, spending time and communicating with clients and everyday people who, again, have very little reference point on very few reference points, right? And so I make a lot of, you're stuck with a lot of like pop culture references. You're stuck with a lot of, it's like, you remember the scene in The Office where, this person did this, and that's kind of like, it's like that. And you to take it a little deeper, it's like this, and you gotta learn how to bridge those gaps for people, right? Because if you just kind of take it at face value, it's like you're speaking a different language, and it's not very helpful. It's not very relatable, and the context is completely lost, right? In most cases. And so it's really been a challenge and an experience to learn how to better communicate with people who don't have the context of the rest of it.
Yeah. I think it's awesome today that we have so many people like you, and, I'll put like N1 and Cassim in that category, but also just like people that really understand, and Ben Yanis, people that really understand biomechanics, because I can't tell you how many times I got injured lifting. I was a kid, ego lifting and all that stuff, but like I had a shoulder impingement. I remember my coach yelling at me. It's like, keep your lacrosse stick up. I was like, coach, my shoulder's throbbing anytime I move my shoulder past here. I herniated my disc, just like squatting in a Smith machine, just doing stupid things, not because I didn't know. And also, it's like when you take your perspective, it's like not only you're going to be less likely to be injured, but you're also going to be applying more tension to the muscle, so you're going to see better results too.
Yeah, man. I think, I've been very fortunate to be able to learn under, Cassim, for example. I met Cassim in 2016 when I was down and did my 40. That's when I first met him and met all those guys. And, I was fortunate to work for N1 for a year and a half and be an educator and a coach for them, and to help teach seminars and teach other coaches around the world this type of information. And, just to kind of be in that world was cool. And it was a huge, it's been a huge bonus to my career, and I'm grateful for it. Because it's an exposure that many people don't quite get. And I think the most important aspect of all of it was, not only was I learning the information, I was learning the context of the information, and I was not learning it from social media. I was learning it like in person, every day in real time, and applying it not only to myself, but to other people. And like, I was doing that, and I just got reps and reps and reps at that. And I'm very grateful for that. And I think that's where a lot of this, whether it's biomechanics or applied anatomy information or what have you, it can get lost when communicated through social media, because you don't quite have that tactile or immediate feedback from getting to experience it in person in real time. And you lose the context of the information that's being shared, and why it potentially is very relevant to how do you position your body, or the way that a certain load is sort of acting on your body at a given time, and whatever. It's, I've taken a step back a bit from the degree at which those people speak on biomechanics, because, I I existed in that world for enough time. And I spoke that language while I was working there. And I spoke that language years, throughout that process. And it was very beneficial to me. And I think, I was beneficial to others, but those guys are the best at what they do. And I don't need to be another one of those people. And so what I've been trying to do is like, how do I fit into this space? And, how do I, again, continue to help bridge the gap between, because the first time you hear this information and the first time you kind of watch that stuff, whether it's on social media or you get exposed to that information, you're not drinking from a garden hose, dude. You're drinking from a fire hose and it's coming straight out your face. It's a lot and you don't quite know how to decipher it, again, especially if you don't have the context of that information. And so for me, it's kind of been this, well, how do I kind of take a step back and realizing what it felt like and what it's like to not have the context and to kind of be on the front end of that learning process. And how do I help people kind of get there to the point where it doesn't feel like they're drinking from a fire hose anymore, right? It just kind of it feels like a garden hose now. And I'll stop exhausting that analogy, but it's
one of my favorite quotes is, you can only appreciate, understand, and absorb information up to your current level of understanding. And so it comes from the context of Eugene Teo. It was like one of his mentors, but on the mentor's wall, he had taken these certifications over and over and over again. And someone asked him why. And it was like, basically, I'm a different person every time I go and take these certifications. I've learned more, so I will take more away from the certification and learn different things, even though it's the same context repeated or same material repeated.
Oh yeah. I mean, you never read the same book twice. I mean, you could read the same book every year of your life and you'll never read the same book twice because, yeah, I mean, you're a different person, right? And, any seminars that I've gone to in the past several years, it's, even the ones I went to last year, again, I used to help teach this information to other people. And now I'm I've been as an audience member several times, and to these different seminars and talking about the subject matter that I used to actually teach others and, or help teach others, not, but you do absorb it differently. And now I'm not learning it as much to teach other people to the same degree. I'm taking it in of like, okay, that's helpful for me. That puts more context around this. That think about it as like a really big puzzle that you're kind of just piecing together slowly. And there's these middle pieces that you can't quite figure out where they go. You just have these extra pieces lying around where you're like, okay, I get that. I understand that. And globally, I understand that. But like, why does it matter here? And like, why does that matter so much there? And then the more information you learn, and there's just this satisfying thing of like, oh, there it is. I found it. It fits. That makes sense. Again, and once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? And you just continue to do that across your life. And again, the more life experience you have, the more context you have around the information you're learning, right? So I think that's a very powerful thing to continue to stay open and to stay curious and to not stop learning, because you're never going to learn the same thing twice. Like, you're going to learn it in a different way. You're going to hear it said in a different way. Even in many of the things that I absorb now, it's like, obviously I have a ton to continue to learn. Like I feel like I'm, scratching the surface of the iceberg that is what there is to know and how I can expand my own understanding. But many of the things that I feel most trainers need to understand the surface of, I understand, right? But things that are then being, talked about on these podcasts, and you listen back to it, or you go to a seminar and, you get home and, my wife's like, did you learn anything today? Or what'd you learn? And it's like, I didn't really learn much new. Some more things clicked.
Heard a different frame almost.
Yeah. It's different. It was a reframing of the information, and I got more context around where it's important and where it isn't. And that is just as helpful as learning it for the first time. Honestly, even more so, because again, you kind of give that information more power, right? You get to wield it differently.
Yeah.
So, and use it and apply it differently when it's most necessary.
Yeah. It's why I think it's so important to have the underlying foundation for a lot of these things. Like, we went to school, you have a kinesiology degree, I have a bio degree. And luckily, like, one of my favorite classes was physics, and I used to hate physics, but the way he taught it was very contextual. But like, so now I can take that, I have the foundation, I can apply it to biomechanics, versus someone might just like read a page of your book or see that on Instagram. It's like, how do I do this? And they apply that little piece of physics, but they don't see the overarching principle. And when you can see when you can build layers instead of just grasping a block from the top shelf of your grandma's bookshelf, you can start to build this overarching picture versus just having like these little tidbits, which you're parroted on social media everywhere.
Yeah. And just understanding how you move and how that feels when you move. And if you position here versus here, how that feels and how that moves and how you're able to load that differently now. And contextually how that load differs from your arm being positioned differently here. Or maybe the load changes from a cable to a dumbbell or something. It's you start to identify the way that feels and how it transitions into the greater part of a program and how you'd apply it into a consistent training program for anyone, or whether it's for yourself or for someone else. And again, that's powerful. And I think you can get really lost. Obviously, I'm always game for people to learn everything they can, but I think people get lost a little too much in the weeds on some of this stuff, and they do lose sight of the bigger picture of, again, what's most important. And again, that's more or less my framing now of speaking to the everyday gym goer rather than teaching other trainers like myself and you who understand the other stuff so well. And you're like, yeah, I get that stuff, but I want to know this stuff now. It's like, great. Now don't ask me, go to them. They're the experts on it. I've been exposed to it. I've helped teach it sometimes, but they're the experts, man. So go ask them. I don't know.
We've had a lot of deep conversation. And with the fun one, so you're building a home gym. What were your must-haves in your home gym? And then building off of that, if you could have 10 pieces in your home gym, any space, size, money is not of issue, what would it be?
So the pieces I absolutely needed, right, were I needed. So right now I do have a small space. And so that's important in terms of context. And so what I wanted the most is I wanted cables. I needed a rack, right? I needed dumbbells, and I needed a bench. That counts. And I wanted a seated leg curl and a lying leg curl, or seated leg extension, sorry, and a lying leg curl. And so that's kind of what I have now, right? I have those main pieces. I have, pretty much everything I have is from Prime, but I have their Prodigy rack, which is essentially, it's your squat rack, it's your functional trainer, it's your lat pull down, it's your row, it's your everything, right? It's an entire sort of gym setup in one. And that took care of all of those pieces, essentially for me. And then the dumbbells were obviously extremely helpful for, dumbbells are very useful in many places. I just have I have adjustable dumbbells that go from 5 to 80 in increments of 5, which for me, in terms of pressing and stuff like that, like I have to graduate to using other things. So I have a multi-grip football bar that helps. The multi-grip football bar kind of bridges the gap between dumbbells and barbells, right? So instead of being fixed into this pronated position on a barbell, the multi-grip bar allows you to be more semi-pronated or neutral, which emulates more of where your arm path is and wrist position is with a dumbbell. which is really kind of the biggest advantage of a dumbbell, is being able to fit that better to your structure, right? So that's a big piece. And then I really wanted the leg extension and lying leg curl because those are two positions that are next to impossible to recreate without those pieces of equipment, especially to the point at which you can load them, right? Like, you can jimmy rig some type of leg extension, you can jimmy rig some type of lying leg curl, but you can't really, by jimmy rigging it, you can't really load it as much, right? As you get stronger and stronger. So those two pieces were really, really important to me. And that's really all I have in my space is that power, the rack with the functional trainer, and then the dumbbells, and then the combo unit of leg extension, lying leg curl.
The way you did a seated calf raise on that too is awesome. I never even thought about that.
Oh yeah, yeah. So obviously, you want some type of calf raise, right? And a lying leg curl allows you to have a seated leg curl or a seated calf raise machine built right in, right? You have to have a platform in which you can create more range of motion for your ankle, right? So, or your foot to go through. And so I have a utility ladder in my gym that just lives in my garage that's right off my gym. And so I just...
You mean calf machine?
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it's this Cobalt utility ladder that I got from Home Depot, that also is the thing that I use it, around my house, but that's mainly what it's for. But I was looking at that. I was like, I want to do a calf raise. I want to load my calves. I want a way to really kind of challenge my calves at home. And so I was just, I'd done it before in other gyms when I was traveling and teaching and stuff. We'd had to set up, you have to start to innovate more. And, if a gym doesn't have any type of calf raise or anything like that, you kind of get innovative and you start looking at stuff and you're like, that would work. I could do that. And so that's that. I don't know where this is a terrible way to answer these, but I don't know where that leaves me in terms of pieces of equipment. Or
no, I think you were at 9. But it's all right. Let's say if you had 1 or 2 more pieces, unlimited space, what would you add on there?
Personally, what I would add to the gym setup I have currently, which again is minimal, but really kind of does everything I'd want it to, allows me to move in every kind of different movement pattern, and it allows me to load each joint sufficiently, which was the important part to me. It allows me to work through allows me to challenge different resistance profiles within those joint positions too, which is important. Most notably to like the seated leg extension and lying leg curl, which are hard to recreate again to load those joint angles sufficiently. But the one thing that I would add that I don't have is a leg press. I just like a Cyvex, the pivot press. I just think those are just a leg press that pivots really well, and it's yeah. If you've used it, it's the Cyvex leg press essentially. That it's just, you get on it, it's so smooth. You can load up so well. You can drive so much volume and stimulus to your lower body without any extra load on your spine or anything like that. And it's just, I think it's an unbeatable piece of equipment. Honestly, I love it, and that's a luxury item, but that's one of those things where it's like, why would you want that? It's like, are you kidding me? Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And you can obviously on the leg press, you can adjust your foot position and start to bias other muscle groups a little bit more over another. But ultimately, it's a way to get an unbelievable amount of stimulus and tension on your lower body without having to load your spine, which to me is awesome. Because, if you're thinking about, other movements with barbells and stuff, like you're just constantly loading your spine, which again is great, but there's a point at which it's like, it's
diminishing return. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a point of diminishing returns, and it's taxing, and I got to recover from that. But if I can, instead of doing 10 sets of squats, I can do 4 or 5 sets of squats and then get the remaining volume on the leg press, like I recover from that so easily. Right. And so that's just across a year of training or 10 years of training, that's millions of pounds of volume, right? In terms of years of training, like you're getting millions of more pounds of tonnage on your lower body without having to load your spine there. It's like, yeah, that's awesome.
What are you hitting legs with now at home?
So my main, obviously kind of depends on the muscle groups, right? But my main lower body movements at home are barbell focused, right? So squat patterns and deadlift patterns. Oh, I have a trap bar too. Okay, sorry, that's my 10th. Or that's the other one. I do have a trap bar, and so that allows me to. And obviously, a trap bar is a little bit more luxury as well. A trap bar is sort of akin to the multi-grip bar, just for the lower kind of, rather than pressing, you're kind of So the upper body push, it's the lower body push equivalent to the multi-grip bar. But I like the trap bar. It's very versatile. You can perform RDLs, you can perform all types of different variations, squat pattern variations, lunges, split squats, there as well. I have the Prime one, which is adjustable and open. And so, you're not limited by having to step in the middle of it and being, you can do lunges with it. You can do different variations with it. Split squat variations, whatever, but also the load is more central, right? It's more aligned with that center of mass. And, you just, again, you're driving a ton of stimulus there, without having to obviously manage the displacement of that load, as much, right? Which again is just less strain on your low back and less, just less to recover from. Again, you can get more tonnage, you can get more volume in efficiently, which again is kind of the name of the game. How do I get this in efficiently, and how do I set it up in a way where I can continue to show up and do it? And yeah, that I'd say that's in terms of packaging that answer, that was horrible, but
it was a good list. I liked it.
Yeah, no, I guess, can we list them out? So that's a power rack, right, with adjustable cables. So
yep.
So you got your functional trainer, your power rack in one.
That counts as one though. It's one piece.
One piece, right? Okay, so that's one piece. The dumbbells, seated leg extension, lying by curl. Are we counting that as one? Because it's combo unit.
It's combo unit. It counts as one.
All right. Okay, so that's 3.
Trap bar, if you want to count that.
Yeah, trap bar.
And then your power rack bar, or football bar. Mm-hmm.
The multi-grip football bar. And then I would add the leg press.
Okay, 6
to that. That's 6. And again, like, I don't have much else I truly need, right? You can start getting into like, again, like I don't know what else you truly need. I think other, I guess, machines, like back machines, a vertical pull machine and a horizontal rowing machine, like something that's chest supported, ideally, would be great if I had unlimited space and budget. But I'd say those are like really the only other 2 pieces that I would reasonably want to have, because again, if you look at the heat map of me in a gym, like I kind of just hammer the same, like I just hammer the things that work and do kind of cover my bases. And then all the other smaller stuff you can really do with cables and dumbbells. So like, you don't really need a ton of stuff.
Do you have a regular barbell, or do you have like one of the super squat or the kabuki strength?
I have a regular barbell. It's like a Rogue Ohio bar, but
out here in the dark ages.
Yeah. That was just like, I just want to be able to squat normally, RDL and deadlift normally. But yeah, I have a normal barbell too, but I don't press with that just because I have, I've torn my labrum, I have some other shoulder issues. And so I just don't like being fixed into that position necessarily. So the multi-grip bar really helps out with the pressing. Because again, like I'm limited on dumbbells because of space, right? So I don't, and also an entire rack of dumbbells that go up to like 130, 140. Like, I don't know if you've ever bought dumbbells, but they are so expensive.
Yeah.
Like you're spending between, and I don't want to exaggerate here, but between, if you're going to get 100 pounds through 130 pounds just in dumbbells, just that, you're spending $5,000, $6,000. And that's like normal dumbbells. That's not like the Intech shiny, crazy one. Like in terms of like the whole rack of a dumbbell, like if you want to appreciate how little you pay every month to go to a gym that's outfitted the way it is, that's the biggest steal of all time. I mean, the amount of money that a gym has to put out to equip a gym is unreal. And so you also, like when you have to start buying your own equipment, you start to gain a whole new respect for not only the gym you go to and the membership cost you pay every month of like what a steal this is, but also just taking care of that equipment at that gym. You're just like, you do everything you can to be kind to that equipment and not, create unnecessary wear and tear to it because of just the sheer cost of it is pretty unreal.
Yeah. It's like the renting versus buying in a house. You're like, oh, now I have to take care of this.
Yeah, dude. It's something breaks. It's like, like if your water heater breaks, can't text your landlord. You're like, it's your water heater, man. You got to buy a new one. And then you got to get someone to install it. And it's just like, this stuff adds up. And you start to really gain a whole new respect for the gym owner and the access to all that stuff that you do truly have and the shape that it's in, the fact that it works at all and they continue to do maintenance on it. They get new equipment. I think until you're aware of that, it's underappreciated, but once you become aware of it again, it's like, oh wow. Thank you so much for doing all this, man. Like this is a ton of overhead here and all I have to pay is this every month. Like that's wild.
Come to the realization at my point, my lifting career, that like I'm not a normal human being in terms of like my discipline to the gym. Like a lot of people, you see it, and I have my days where I need to put on some banging music and get motivated and hyped. But I was listening to just a podcast yesterday, just like not going through the motions, but I would say executing, doing what I need to do, crossing off the list and like getting it done. And I think, I'm going to failure. I think I trained pretty hard relatively. Might not be that on my squat days and things like that, but yeah. I would say like you see popularized a lot right now. It's like discipline over motivation. But at the end of the day, yeah, you can say I'm going to be disciplined, go to the gym, cross it off my list. But you need to have some reason or motivation, you could call it, to go to the gym. I think that's something you've struggled on. Like, could you speak a little bit on that and how you've willed yourself? Obviously, like, having the home gym helps a lot. But like, how would you tell maybe yourself or other people, it's like, to inspire yourself to go to the gym consistently, like, to get in there?
The feeling I have after, ultimately, to do the thing that you don't want to do for the sake of the way you feel afterwards, right? It is something you have to be, again, create a better relationship with. And it's the same thing of approaching your nutrition. It's, if I eat this way, I feel this way, I sleep this way, I start to look this way. I really like that. Okay. If I go to the gym this many times a week, I train hard when I'm there, I start to feel this way, I start to sleep this way, I start to look this way. I like that too.
Yeah.
And if you've spent time with it and you've spent time without it, you start to really see the delta between those 2 points. Right? You see the difference of the way that you feel and you perform and you show up in your everyday life. And for me, that in and of itself is worth it. And it may be hard to get yourself into it. But again, it's you rarely feel worse after a walk, right? You rarely feel worse after a workout. You rarely feel worse after eating something that you know, or that just truly is more nutritious than something that isn't. And it's starting to identify what those things are for you, and for me, that's moving enough every day. That's training enough every week. That's eating is, healthy and eating in a certain way. It's in helping facilitate my ability to sleep. I'm someone that has sleep issues, and I notice if I don't have those things there in my life, then everything else struggles, right? Then my productivity and my professional life struggles. My outlook on life changes. The person I show up as changes. My attitude, everything changes. So kind of getting in those bare essentials, it's really trying to better identify with who you are when you're doing those things versus who you are when you're not. And to me, that's just the reality of that. I don't know if I have anything else there that, wouldn't go too much into the weeds or speak against potentially some helpful or harmful ways of looking at it. But to me, that's the bare bones of it. And then just knowing, like, understanding that, training 60 minutes of strength training across a week lowers your risk of all-cause mortality by 30+%. It's like, oh, just by having 2 30-minute sessions in a week, which is very little, or 3 20-minute sessions, I can reduce my risk of dying by
substantially.
30%, substantially. And then you're strength training again, like between strength training and aerobic training and just your physical effort on a daily basis helps reduce your chances of getting 40+ chronic preventable diseases, right? That within those are the diseases that most humans will die from. So not only do you feel better and you show up better in your daily life from doing the things that you should be doing, you have a much lower chance of actually dying from something you don't need to die from, right? And it's sort of that quote of, I kind of always, I try to put things through the frame of, it's like I forget, I'm going to paraphrase it because I thought I had it, but I don't. But it's like, your life begins when you realize that you like only have one. It's like to realize that, like, this isn't a trial run. This is it. This is all you get. So however you feel about that is up to you. But for me, realizing that every day is like, wow, okay, my decisions matter, and there is a cause and effect to how much effort I put into something. There's a cause and effect to how I show up for myself physically and mentally. In the way that I, sleep, that regulates health, right? I mean, if you don't sleep well, you're not going to be a healthy person long term. Like, you have to sleep, right? So for me, it's a lot of these things are really there to help me sleep. And as long as I'm sleeping well, my life goes pretty good, right? Yeah. I feel pretty good. I perform well. My work goes better. I'm a better person to my friends, to my family, to my wife. And for me, that's enough. And realizing that alone is a powerful thing. And so using that as a tool to sort of reframe your situation is and can be powerful.
Well, that was awesome. Austin Kern, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time. Where can everyone find you?
Instagram's a great place. to find me. I don't know if it's a great place in general, but it is a great place to find me. It's just search Austin Current is my name through there, and I got a red beard on. Looks a little more red on Instagram than I think it is, but I am partially ginger, so I do have a big red beard. So if you search Austin Current on Instagram, I'm the guy with the big red beard. Follow me there. And then if you search Science of Strength Training on Amazon, or just search strength training on Amazon, you can find my book. It's got a yellow cover. And that's pretty much the best places to find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Austin. All right, if you made it this far, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube, or if you're podcasting, give us a 5-star review. It really helps us out, helps other people to see more of our content. Again, I just want to take the time to thank Austin. It was a really awesome conversation, and I will have all of his links and everything detailed in the description. And I hope you guys thought the same and learned something valuable from this conversation. I know that I did. Well, until next time, guys, be good.